Ah,
Hello, good afternoon. I am Nancy Sheed of Sheed Communications. I'm very, 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 very excited to be here with Jen Liddy. Jen is a coach, and I just told her my new description for her is content whisperer, which is a thing, and she does it really well. But she can tell you more about her credentials when I let her speak. But what I would love to say about Jen, or I'm saying to you, Jen, is I think when I am in your company, I never feel more listened to. I've never felt more listened to than I have when I'm in your company. You ask the best questions. You're an amazing listener. So I don't know if that's in your bio, but I really think
no,
it
that is so generous.
is.
Wow.
And yeah. So anyway, without further ado, content whisperer Jen Liddy, thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh, this is so fun for me. I'm such an extrovert and I miss one-on-one conversations. So this is super fun.
Me too. Me too. So Jen, you and I came to meet through sort of mutual friends in the coaching world and women entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and service-based businesses. When I met you, you were Coach Jen Liddy Coaching, and you've gone through this really fascinating evolution. So, like, a little bit of background about how, I mean, and I still see you as a coach as well. So, a little bit of how you got to where you are right now.
Absolutely. So back in the day, I was a high school English teacher, and then I became a college professor, and I taught English and literature and writing, and then I got trained to teach personal development to college students and the staff at the college, and I just loved this personal development stuff. So that's what kind of made me feel like when I jumped from teaching to entrepreneurship, and I learned entrepreneurship from the inside out. It was really a scary thing to become an entrepreneur, moving from being a teacher where you get your paycheck every 2 weeks and you get your, all of your benefits and everything. So I did that jump by becoming a fitness studio owner, a co-owner, and I learned business just kind of, I call it baptism by fire.
Baptism by fire.
Yes. I say I put in like $250,000 worth of sweat equity to get my very own PhD in business. That's basically what I always say about that.
Better that than books. Yes. I would have never read the books. So
me neither. When I left that business, I really wanted to help women. I was surrounded by these clients of ours who were super creative entrepreneurs, but they kind of couldn't get out of their own way because their creativity keeps them in ideation mode all the time, and they kind of can't implement or integrate things.
Right.
So that's why when I left, I was like, I really want to help other women avoid all the pitfalls that I fell into and that I had learned. So I became a business coach, and just over the course, like we all do, when we get into something, we kind of, filter and filter and filter and filter until we get real clarity. And I figured out that I've taken my old history as an English teacher,
right,
and kind of and my love of language and writing, and married it with business. And now I'm kind of a content creation specialist.
Okay. For those people who don't speak the love language of content, right? Content, we, at least in our world, we tend to think of writing, which we're going to touch upon, but like, just if you're that small business owner, or even, for my clients who are more writers and thought leaders, right? Like, there's more to just content than writing, but where do you see like the biggest struggles, like, and maybe it's across the board, where do you see the struggles with content? Is it the deciding what your brand is and what you stand for and what your services are? Or is it over here, the other end of what am I putting on social media and writing in my blog post, or across the gamut? Let's define what you and I see as content.
Sure. I always say that content is everything and everything is content. So, content could be your profile on LinkedIn, or it could be your bio on Facebook, right? It could also be the webinar that you want to give, or the training that you want to give. That's content. Or your signature talk is content. Most people, when they think of content, they think about social posts, but that's not the only content that there is. And like you said, it's not just writing, like speaking, live videos that you do. Even if you did, like an Instagram story, that's content.
Right.
So it doesn't have to be always writing. So the problems that I see for people are they get really caught up in, at the beginning, they get caught up in like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what my brand is all about. And then once they figure that out, then they bring some other sabotaging behaviors in, which are, okay, now I know like my brand, but I don't know what to say. I don't know really who I'm speaking to, and I don't know how to be consistent. So those are the problems that most people deal with.
And Jen, so you sort of made the shift from coach to understanding that people may have decided their business, but that content was like then their logjam, right? What is, with regard specifically to content, what's your zone of genius? Like, how do you help people? Because I think that's going to get to the storytelling part, right? But how did you come to this conclusion, aside from your piecing together the pieces of your history that make Jen? How did you suddenly get that aha of like, oh, this is my zone of genius?
What I'm really good at, I found, was pulling stuff out of people's heads. So if you had a course in your mind that you could just never get out, like I can pull it out of your mind, and I'm a sequential thinker, and the people around me are more iterative thinkers. So they're more spirally. So I realized just by watching my patterns, like, oh, I can help people create linear movement in a space that normally feels so spirally to them. And that was kind of a zone of genius moment to me that my clients always really appreciated. So no matter what it was, like I remember I had a client, we were building her business, and she said, oh my God, I have to speak at a PTA thing and I don't know what to say. It had nothing to do with her business. So I said, would it give you some relief for me to pull the speech out of you? And we did. And I was like, this is so much fun for me. And so relieving for my clients. How can I do more of that? So that's kind of the impetus for it.
And to me, when you're saying that, I'm like, there's that great listener. There's that great listening, those amazing listening skills of Jen Liddy, where she leans in and she's like, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Oh, like that is my, like, so that makes complete sense. And it's such a gift because we're all stuck in our own heads, right? Like,
yes.
And so helping tell that linear story makes great sense to my brain that likes to be linear, that isn't. When did this sort of storytelling aha come to you? Or maybe it's always been part of it back from your literature days, but how did storytelling kind of become what I'm seeing from you be kind of one of your key, I don't know, pillars, right, of content?
Well, one of the ahas I had was very early on in my content writing career. I would give a lot of how-to content, which is fantastic for readers. But what I realized is when you're a content creator who really focuses too much on the how-to content, nobody needs to buy anything from you because you've told them how to do it. There's a place for how-to stuff or hard teaching in content creation. But if all of your stuff is how-to stuff, why should somebody think they should buy from you? Because the perception in their brain is, oh, she's just telling me how to do everything. What I know is people they need more than your how-to content. Like they need you to hold their hand and help them transform. But when you're meeting them there, if you give them a lot of how-to content, it's almost like a Band-Aid. And they're like, I'm good. But like, I know that they're really not good, right? So then I was like, okay, if I'm not going to give how-to content, how can I engage people? And I have always been somebody who likes to kind of create a colorful story. Even if I go to Target, there's something that happened on the way to Target. Like You're
so good at it. You're so good.
And so I started just with my email list playing around with stories. And it could be a really, I have to say, often the stories are, here's some stupid moronic thing I did where I learned a lesson, and here maybe you could take the lesson. So I always try to make the story engaging and realistic, but also and there's a lesson tied to it that you can use in your own business.
Yes. Well, and for those of you just joining us, we're here with Jen Liddy, who's a business coach, and I'm calling her the content. I'm calling you the content whisperer.
I love that. I'll take it.
What did you say? Content creation specialist.
Yeah, I think I said content creation, which I also just made up because I never called myself that before.
And we're talking about why and how to use storytelling. And it's just been fun to watch you on this journey as well, Jen, as this has come into it. So you talked about just sort of literally taking everything that's happening in your real life and those become stories. I want to talk about, I hate to say how to, but sort of how one does that. But I think I want to set the tone as well with, you got to be a little vulnerable, or at least I've seen you and the way you bring stories in it's not perfect. It doesn't look, all polished up. It's typically a very vulnerable moment of like, has this ever happened to you? I'm having a great day. I'm having a bad day. I was at Target, that aisle that you go to, right? So was that a leap for you? I mean, was that something you had to deal with first before you could bring storytelling in, or is that just something that's been part of it?
It's fairly natural for me to be vulnerable because as a teacher, when I was teaching high schoolers and college students, the way that I would get their trust is to show them that I was a real person. So I have always found that showing people my vulnerable side, people certainly judge me for it, but I normally find the payoff is big because if you can be vulnerable to people, they see you, like it levels the playing field. So my students never kind of felt like I was up here and they were down there. And that's what I wanted, right? And that's what I want with my audience, for them to not see me as like, I'm so far ahead of them, like I'm doing this work too. So that's been fairly natural to me. I will say though, Nancy, one of the rules I have about telling vulnerable stories is, number one, I only tell my vulnerable stories. There's so many stories I want to tell, maybe that include my son or my husband or my parents or my sister and brothers or whatever. But those are not my stories to tell. So I'm really very protective of like, I will only be vulnerable about myself.
Got it.
And if I'm going to be vulnerable about somebody else, I ask their permission.
Right.
And the second thing is, if I'm going to be vulnerable in a story, I make sure that I'm not speaking from a bleeding raw wound, that I really have had to do some work around it already to clean it up, so that I don't like expose. If you tell a story and it's kind of like dirty in that way where you haven't cleaned up your emotions around it, it really doesn't serve your audience. So I always try to make sure that that's finished before I bring it to my audience.
And I think, is it Brene Brown who kind of sets it up in terms of it's establishing that trust, but that oversharing or that rawness or that, you know what I mean? Yes. Also is a way to not build trust with your audience. So I appreciate you setting that framework around it, but it's still a big leap, I think, for some of us who are like, this is for public and this is for private, right? But I love how you've done it. So you've talked about a strategy kind of for bringing in vulnerability. Do you have a framework for bringing storytelling in, or ideas for people who this might be a foreign concept?
100%. And I want to frame it by saying you don't have to be super vulnerable if you want to work up to it. Storytelling does not mean you need to expose your raw white underbelly. It's just something that you work toward. But the first thing I would say is, start to notice all of the little things that happen around you every single day, because those are stories, and a story doesn't have to be epic. We have to take people on this huge hero's journey, but even something as like I had this story. I had my son back in the before times when we would have people in our cars with us. I had my son and 3 of his friends in the car, and they were yammering and kind of arguing and fighting, just being stupid 10-year-old boys. And I found it really annoying. And I thought, oh, this is annoying to me. And I've got 4 great kids in the back who are like all getting along. But my mom had 4 annoying kids who fought all the time and were not great and were a gigantic pain in the butt. And it just like, that became a story for me of talking about like creating a framework for yourself around like, are you noticing what irritates you? Are you noticing the things around you? It just became a launch pad. I mean, I was literally sitting at a stop sign with 4 10-year-old boys in my car, and it became a whole story. And I thought, how is this a lesson that I can teach my audience? And so sometimes it starts with, this thing happened, I noticed it. How is it like something else that my audience could do? So that's a way that I kind of forward engineer it. Like I start with that. And then another framework I use is I think about a lesson that I really know my audience needs to hear. So this is how I reverse engineer it. So I'll think about, I'm hearing a lot of people complaining about X, Y, or Z, or I notice in a lot of Facebook groups I'm in, people are complaining about this or that. This is a lesson that I really think my audience could benefit from learning about. So then I think, instead of just like teaching them, hey, you need to learn this lesson, I will reverse engineer it into, what's like a metaphor or a story that I've experienced that where I learned that lesson, where I had to be vulnerable and learn that exact lesson. And then I just tell the story, and then I'll say, why am I telling you this story?
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. Have you ever blah, 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 blah. So there's a way to forward engineer it and reverse engineer it.
I love that. And that's a gift because all my brain thinks is linear. I need to make this point, right? And then I
Professor
have
Nancy, right?
Jen Liddy. Have you ever? Do you ever? But that's really helpful because I think some of us think forward, some of us think backwards. And for me, like I said, I thought of you the other day. We were going through old recipes. Okay, first of all, who goes through old recipes? But I'm like, oh my God, I'm seeing a Jen Liddy opportunity here of how I can turn. I forget what it was. I think it was like editing your content or something. But anyway, I had that moment.
Well, let's take that, because my next trick that I want to teach you about is get it down in your phone. So in the middle of driving home from Target, when the thing happened at Target and you're oh, my audience needs to know about this. This is either funny or like poignant or whatever. You take your phone and you say, take a note, and you just like write it down there, because you're going to forget 100%.
Okay, so my not very organized note taking, that was my question. So are you literally audioing it into take a note or into the notebook? Yep. Okay.
Yes.
I was like, what notebook did I write that idea down in? Where did that go?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And then Jen, is there a practice like beyond that? I mean, in terms of structure, like is there the structure of like, do you have prompts? Let's say somebody is staring at that blank sheet of paper, right? Like, is there a framework or prompts? And I don't give away all your secrets, but just to kind of get somebody thinking around this, in addition to the forward engineering and backward engineering.
Yeah, and I'm happy to give away the secrets, because people don't hire me for these secrets. Like, you can find these anywhere. These are storytelling is the oldest form of learning. It's how we remember the most. The reason people hire me is because they want to learn how to do it better or easier or faster or whatever. But a couple of secrets. Everybody thinks they have to tell a story from the inception to completion. And it's not necessarily true. Like, sometimes you just need to tell a snippet of a story to make your point. And frankly, you might have stories inside of your brain that could be 3, 4, 5 pieces of content, could be emails or blogs or videos or whatever. Don't use it all up in one fell swoop. So definitely like get the nuggets out that you need to get out. The other thing I will suggest is details, like real life details make things so relatable. So if you're telling a story, like I have this funny picture from my childhood that it's me at the garage, the fire department garage, having a Christmas party. My dad was a fireman. And the picture is I'm in my my maroon velvet pants and my pink satin shirt, and I'm taking a gift from Santa, which happened every single year. But the picture, if you zoom out on the picture, there's a Raggedy Ann who's serving as the elf, and there's an Oscar the Grouch puppet. He's staring right into the camera. And I never noticed this. I never noticed all of these other details before a couple of years ago when I found the picture. So those kinds of details are where the interesting thing of the story is, right? And you can probably, just from me describing the Raggedy Ann and the clown and Oscar the Grouch and my satin pants or my satin shirt, those are the details that make a story much more relatable. So if you can like pull out, if you're talking about, in fact, just yesterday I was talking to somebody who helps people recover more quickly from surgery. And I was like, imagine if you could help people, like, that moment that you wake up after being sick and you look to your side dresser or the night table, and there's like 7 bottles there that you're supposed to take medicine from. It's like that kind of really like Polaroid moment that helps your story come more to life.
I love that. And I think that's helpful because, again, we get so caught up in we have to make this point, right? Yeah. And I got to listen in for part of your content workshop last week, and I loved, again, and you just touched upon it in terms of what I think might help guide your stories is understanding your audience, right? Yeah. And I think I work with clients too in terms of like you know what you're offering, but if you aren't clear exactly about their pain points or what they're experiencing, or as you've just so beautifully done, what they're waking up to and what's in their brain when they wake up, it's going to be harder to tell them, that you understand how you can help them or, be of service to them, if you're not really clear about that. Is
that's
that
a foundation. You're right.
I mean, in terms of maybe telling better stories or integrating their stories better.
Right. So if you know that your people are specifically dealing, if you know that your audience is specifically dealing with a pain point of they just can't move the way that they used to move. They're older, their bodies don't do what they used to do. And that's the point you want to make. You have to know their pain point. You have to know what they're also looking for. So it's not just the pain, but what's the result that they're looking for. And those stories should be tweaked to that. Because if you're talking to an audience of 50 plus people and you're a yoga teacher and you're talking about like vigorous hot vinyasa to, lose weight, you're probably going to miss the mark, because those people in their 50s and above may not care about that. They may care more about mobility.
Right.
So just understanding that, you're right. That is the foundation for all the things.
Right. And you may be teaching vinyasa yoga that does this, this, and this. And again, that in furthering your example, that person may want to say, like, I want to get out of bed and not creak, or have it take me 5 minutes to get out of bed. Right. Like, so again, we use those solution terms that aren't all, if you can tell it in the story or the narrative or whatever, I think that's also really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Jen, have you seen examples, either other people's work or your work, where they just, knock it out of the park, right? Like some of your favorite, like, storytelling stories.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple of copywriters that I really love, and I follow them. Marisa Corcoran is one of them. She does a wonderful job. She's great. She has something called the Copy Chat, and it's actually coming up in February. It's like she does these fantastic interviews for, I think it's 5 days, 2 interviews a day. And just listening to the way she talks to other people, I love this stuff, and I do this stuff all day, every day. And even I learn something from it.
Right.
And so, yes, I think following people that are really good at this stuff, who find it effortless, is really important. And also, don't beat yourself up, because it's quite an experiment to learn how to do this yourself.
Okay. Good point. Awesome point. Yeah. So I'll give a shout out to my favorite. She comes to mind every time. Is are you familiar with Ann Handley?
No.
Profs. So she has a book called Everybody Writes. Her newsletter is awesome. Her Instagram content is awesome.
Wow.
I mean, yeah. So we'll swap on those. I'll put links in as well. Just everything is a story, and I'm gobsmacked how and she's all she a lot of her stuff is about tone and how brands and people get tone and voice right. But I feel like that goes closely with that
storytelling
kind of stuff. So I'll share that back to you. And
I would love that.
Marisa Corcoran, is that
Corcoran? Yeah, okay. Marisa Corcoran. Yeah.
Jen, this is such a treat. Tell me, I really appreciate your time. Well,
it's my pleasure. I always love talking to you too.
I feel that way. But I just, as a person who helps people with content, I see how it's easier to help others. I'm trying to do this better. And you've been an inspiration to me to see how it seems to come so easy to you. So it's been helpful to understand more about your process. How, Jen, could people find you or connect with you or learn more about you? I'll share in the links, but what's the best way you would love for people to find you?
I'm on the socials at Jen Liddy Coach. I'm a 1N Jen, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram mostly. I have a website where you can find out almost anything you want, which is just jenliddy.com. And there you can get, one of the most helpful things people like to get at my website is a framework to help them. It's called the Customized Content Planner, and it's a framework that helps you save hours of time every week by creating your content in advance. And every time somebody downloads it, they're like, this is so simple. How did I not think of this before? So I want you to understand, like, it's very simple. And then I break it down for you with how-tos and examples that will save you so much time and energy on your content.
Do you see my shoulders? I go, That'd be so nice.
It is nice. It's a great solution.
Okay, so I will put the links in here, and this will be in other places when we're no longer live. But it is such a treat, Jen. I love chatting with you, and I love this new take. And everybody can always use help with their content. So thank you for sharing your zone of genius.
Oh, thanks. It's fun for me too. Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks for being here. Bye.
Bye, everyone.